Good afternoon, everybody. Shall we begin? On time? Okay. Perhaps we need to close the doors. All right. Welcome to plenary number 2. It's a very special and important plenary because it is called the Open Youth Spot. So I like to stress the word open because I'm here as a representative of the young at heart. And I'm an honoured guest, along with my other colleague, the even younger at heart, Catty. We are thrilled to be part of this panel, which has been conceived and is conceived by youth, and it is also obviously has youth participating in it. And it is totally imbalanced as far as gender is concerned. Yoo-hoo! So, right, just yes, right. You can now tweet how it's actually unfair to men. All right. No, but seriously, we have actually a very interesting topic on the agenda this afternoon. We've already had an extremely interesting dialogue over morning coffee. So what you're going to get is hopefully a continuation of that dialogue. I'm simply going to run through the names of our participants because they're going to introduce themselves. This is how we've decided to start. But also because of our live transcript person at the back needs to hear who we are one more time. So as moderator, I am Marianne Franklin. I'm from the Internet Rights and Principles Coalition, which I currently co-chair along with Robert Bodle, who is currently in the US following us remotely. I'm also from Goldsmiths University in London. Catty Rodriguez is here, my other young at heart and wild at heart colleague. She will talk about who she is and why she's here shortly. I have, to her left-hand side, I have Ravi Aviles. Ravi Aviles, she'll talk about why she's here shortly. To her left, I have Anya Skov. And to her left, Paula Roth, the genuinely young at heart. Okay, so I'm going to now hand over to the panel to tell us who they are and why they're here, and then we'll launch into, hopefully, a very interesting discussion. As audience members, you're also invited to participate. I will simply keep time, keep focus, and all those other things that people do when they're moderating. Okay.
Okay, hello again, and thank you very much for having me here. My name is Ravi Aviles. I work at the Council of Europe in the Directorate for Democratic Governance, and I am part of the team that is organizing the World Forum for Democracy, which is an annual gathering of more than 1,000 participants, and it brings together civil society, activists, political leaders, business and media representatives, as well as academia. The topic of last year's forum was how we can re-establish the link between citizens and political decision makers in the digital age by means of e-participation initiatives and digital activism. And the topic of privacy was, of course, very strong in all the debates. And this year's forum will be on the issue of youth participation. So why I'm here is to tackle mainly the question of how we can increase the impact of particularly young digital activists in institutionalized decision-making and in order to put the issue of privacy on the political agenda and to make the voice of the citizens heard, and particularly of the young, because in the end, we have to deal with the decisions in the future that are made now. So.
Thank you very much, Ribera. That's lovely. Moving on to Paula. Sorry, Anya. Excuse me, Anya.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm afraid my presentation will be a little bit shorter. I'm representing here a network of European digital youth, and this is the network of, it's an informal network of young people, activists, and European youth organizations that are working on advocacy of digital rights and providing capacity building trainings for local and international events, and basically people who decided to get together and work towards a better internet, because people who wanted to get involved and to have their say in the shaping of our future internet. I'm also working in and representing Nerdy here as a researcher on privacy and internet governance. So today I'm here to speak about how debate on privacy is shaped by digital activism and by activists and privacy advocates. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anya. And Paula?
I'm Paula. I'm active in the Pirate Party, and I'm here because of New Media Summer School to give back some of the power or give influence to young people in this debate, which is mostly relevant because most young people use the internet as well. And there's also a great issue in being an activist because we don't know the future. So it's a real concern about privacy, and that's one of the main issues that I'm interested in.
And Khadija?
Hi, thank you, Marianne. So my name is Catitza Rodriguez. I'm here to talk a little about also privacy. I want to thank for the invitation from the Youth Coalition who organized this panel, because they choose us, they take the decision to invite us as speakers and discuss in equal footing altogether this issue, which is very important. So I see this panel more or less to be divided in two topics, or more or less in general terms. How to protect your privacy when you are campaigning against your government in protest, social protest. And the other part of the discussion is more about what do we do as a society? How do we do activism that could stop the mass surveillance that we are now living? So this is one of the two topics that I want to throw out on the table for discussion and have an interactive dialogue, because it's a complex topic that I think is difficult. It's something that we need to keep talking. So I don't know if one of the things that recently happened, briefly I will mention, one of the recent campaigns that happened in the United States is what Reset the Net, which was trying to take back our privacy and ask companies, individuals, to start using encryption to protect their privacy against government surveillance. And it was an act to say, hey, legislators, you are not doing enough in the United States to rein mass surveillance, so we are going to take back our privacy right now by taking tools, by using encryption, by pushing companies to install end-to-end encryption, so we can control back our privacy.
Okay, thanks very much, Khadija, because that's a very important lead-in to these 4 points that came out this morning. They need not continue today, but there are some questions. My first question would be, to follow on from Khadija's, how has activism changed in an internet-embedded arena for action? So how has activism changed, or not, in an arena for action that's actually now more and more dependent on the internet and the web? So we were talking a little bit about it today. I was just wondering if you had any responses to that. Any of you?
Okay, I'll start. Well, I think
What's your name?
It's Anna.
Anya, sorry, excuse me, that's Anya.
Anya. So I think one aspect of activism is digital activism. The way I understand it is when we're using various digital tools and when we are applying the network, which gives us a certain, a much bigger access, the scale and the low cost of using the network. So the outreach is much bigger when the means are much smaller if, for example, you're organizing an action of protest somewhere in the city. So I think digital tools and means are a very important additive part, but still it very much depends who is standing behind it, because if it's a group of professionals and people who understand what they're doing and how they want to address the issue, how they want to maybe further change the policy and to deliver their message, that is what I think is the most important. So digital tools, they're supportive, but the message and who is standing behind, the team that is working on the message, I think is still pertains to the essence of the activism. Thank you.
Okay, the means to an end, not an end in themselves. But Ribera, I see you have a point.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Anya was saying. I think what we the difference between digital activism and activism that we maybe knew before is that it is now a lot easier to mobilize many people in a shorter time frame. And I think that is what the internet is particularly good at. Also, on this basis, we can create so many new innovative tools for connecting with citizens, connecting with politicians. Like, for example, using crowdsourcing to draft legislations, using e-petitions. There are so many new ways now that we are at the moment, exploring. And
Well, for instance, the live Twitter feed has gone down, so it's not very activist. Sorry, I just wanted to pop that in. You have to be able to manipulate the tools as you wish for it to work, I would like to add. Twitter people. Anyway, moving on. Paula.
Well, most of my points had already been taken, which is good. But there's also this point where most activism today is connected to internet, at least here. Because most organizing is done by or partly on the internet, because it's so expensive to plan it ahead. Like, if you want to organize a big demonstration more than for many people, like back in the days, you had to prepare it beforehand, you had to send invitations, you had to find out who to send the invitations to. We don't have that objective anymore. You can organize it reactive, like you can have an organized demonstration by tomorrow if you'd like, which is really bringing the power to do stuff closer to people, because you don't have to know how to organize. It's all there on the internet.
Okay, so that brings us to something I'm sure Catty has something to say about, the idea that it might be, oh, sorry, Anya, did you? No. The idea that it somehow is easier to be an activist because of the internet. And we all know there's a debate, because it's supposedly easier, it's therefore less significant and less important, and it's slacktivism. I hear this a lot in my workplace, that if you click, you're not really an activist. So, Catty, do you have a comment about whether it is easier or whether there is more or less work involved in online, digital-based forms of activism and mobilization?
I think I have done both kind of activism, like mobilizing I'm Peruvian, and we were fighting my authoritarian regime in that moment, and mobilizing was hard. There were no internet in those days, so I'm not so young. But still, we were able to organize in houses, after school, after university, pamphlets, papers, flyers, posters. Now we have the tools, but still the line between digital of traditional, I think, is blurry, because sometimes you use same ideas, just you use digital tools for those ideas. You want to get attention to the press, you want to get the message to the end user, like you want that your mother or your father understand what we are talking about. One of the success of the Sopa Pipa campaign was that, at least in the United States, in San Francisco, you were in the metro and people were talking about what happened to them for the internet when this bill was going to happen. So that's the kind of activism that if we are able to use digital tools to educate the general public, so they don't need NGOs to defend their rights, but they can defend themselves, that's like a powerful dream for an activist, be able to mobilize the masses.
Anya?
Well, I have a comment to that, thinking back again at the complexity of tools and issues and coming back to privacy. What I think is kind of important is that this lack of understanding or complexity of the topic, especially recent implications of Edward Snowden's revelations, for example, and mass surveillance, when you don't really understand how it works, it can be not always an incentive to get more involved, but it can be also something that would stop you. So I think it's very important to translate the message and to explain it to the users, and also to get them involved. For example, like the recent campaign Reset the Net is taking one step further, offering you various tools that you can download and use to protect your privacy online. Thank you.
Ribera, did you have a comment on this?
Yeah, I think it's also an important aspect that digital activism does not only put the privacy issue on the political agenda, but that also, on the other hand, the privacy of the digital activists is protected. And as Anya was saying, when the activists have to be scared that all their that they leave traces online that might do harm to them sometime, of course, then they won't engage that much online politically. So I think it's also important that we establish mechanisms to protect the privacy, of course, so that this movement of digital activists can really grow.
Okay, so that brings us to, in fact, the next hub of questions. We're moving there quite naturally. The mechanisms we might need to protect the privacy. Before that, we need to ask what sorts of privacy concerns, specific privacy concerns, are specific to any form of online activism, mobilization. And Ribera just mentioned one, to be able to not be tracked relentlessly. So this, of course, raises issues about how far you can actually take this. Any comments on what specific issues? Privacy, you see what sort of privacy we're looking at? Anonymity? You can argue if you're an activist, you've given away your privacy. You've become a public figure. So perhaps, you know, you should not bother with it. So what specific concerns are at stake for the work that all four of you are doing?
This is Catty.
Catty, excuse me, yeah.
For the transcript. So there are many things. First, right now we use our phone for everything. And anytime we are tweeting or we are communicating through SMS, we are also telling others where we are located and with who we are communicating with or who are next close to us. So when we are in a protest, you know, we are giving away, if we were in the protest in the street in that moment in time, to the government who will have access to the data. So that's why that's one of the risks. But being an activist myself, I know that sometimes, even if you're in risk, you will fight for whatever campaign you are protesting for, and you will take some risk and chance, but doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to protect yourself. You will try to use the means that you have, for instance, to hide or to protect your anonymity, because anonymity protect you against retaliation that the government could have against you. And there are tools like Tor that activists can use to hide their IP address or where they are communicating from.
Okay, so in order to protect yourself from prosecution or persecution of exercising other rights that we actually have by law, and those two rights we have are the freedom of expression and the freedom of assembly. We know in parts of the world where freedom of assembly is actually a very dangerous thing to do. I still remember Tunis in 2005. To be out on the streets there was not actually a very secure feeling. But the thing is that if we're talking specifically about privacy, what is the difference? If you're on your mobile phone, or if you're organizing an e-petition, don't the authorities know where you are and who you are anyway?
Yes, they do. But it doesn't have to be that way, and it shouldn't. You have to distinguish between what different instances should know and should be able to find out. And there's that distinction today. And it's also important to keep in mind that just because you want change doesn't mean you have to be a public person or should become a public person, because that shouldn't be the case.
Well, thank you, Paula. That's a very powerful point. I hope we all got that one. Anybody else? Ribera? Anya?
Yeah, I think we have
Ribera?
to...
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, Ribera, I'm just cueing who it is.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have to distinguish a little bit maybe between public actions and private actions. Because if we sign a petition online, I think it's not necessarily a problem if we can be identified or if it's visible that we have signed the petition, because if you sign a petition offline, it's also visible that you have signed the petition. But when it comes to the more private sphere, like with whom you are in contact, what your exact political views are, I think this is really dangerous if we don't protect the privacy in this regard.
Okay. Anya?
Anya, well, I want to agree with Ribera, and I think that it is important that the same rights we have offline, we should have the same rights online. There should be no difference. Everything we have the right to do offline should be the same online. So even if I'm posting something online or starting a petition, there should be no way that the government or legislation is not protecting me. And another point that I wanted to touch upon is that I forgot it, but I'll come back to it. Thank you.
Oh, thank goodness. Not only the young at heart forget things. That's good to know. Just, it happens. It'll come back. Any other comments from the audience about what we're looking at is privacy, not in a kind of blanket sense, but the distinctions between identification you need to make to be a legitimate petition signer, online or offline, and the more nebulous issues of being able to have a conversation about a particular action you're organizing without being snooped on and without that information being given to authorities who might want to pursue you because you're an activist and activists do bad things. Could I just remember that, just remind us that in 2011 there were huge riots in the City of London. These weren't activists, these were rioters, and that distinction is very important for how governments and law enforcement officers respond. If you're an activist, in some parts of the world you're seen as rioters, and some rioters in some part of the world see themselves as activists, if you get my point. The point is privacy issues became very clear in London when the authorities wanted to actually close down or access the instant messaging service that the rioters were using. And the argument was, okay, they may be rioters, but they also have rights. So if we got any comments about specific privacy issues, can we unpack what we mean by privacy if we're activists, in the broadest understanding of the term? Not necessarily rioters. Sorry, you've been up twice. Do you want to?
It's just not about privacy, it's more like another question.
What's the comment on?
It is a particular...
Could you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, of course. Carsten Schiefner with DENIC, the German registry for .de. My question goes to Rabia. In particular, you mentioned one particular thing that was crowdsourcing for legislation. And I thought this is kind of interesting in the sense that currently we have like the deep pocket companies in Brussels and elsewhere lobbying legislation to some extent. And I just wonder whether crowdsourced legislation has been done already, and what were the first experiences. So that would have been my question. Off topic in terms of privacy, of course, but yeah.
But on topic in terms of activism?
Yeah.
Rabia, would you like to briefly respond to that?
Yeah, actually there was already an experiment with crowdsourced legislation in Finland. It was about a new law on off-road trafficking. And they set up an online platform and the citizens could register and participate in drafting the actual law. The ministry was involved in the whole process. And later on, after the law had been drafted, it was passed on to the ministry. And I think it's still in the process of adoption, but so far the whole process was quite successful because it was not only about voting, but there was also a lot of deliberation on the law, on the new law going on this platform, and so it also kind of it didn't only increase the transparency of the process and the participation, but also the knowledge of the citizens on the situation on off-road trafficking in this particular example in Finland. So yeah, it's happening.
Okay, thank you. Another question is there any initiatives already going on to also just not doing, or to do it just not just on the national level, like in Finland, but also on a supranational level, like in Brussels, for example, like on an EU level? Have you any knowledge about this one?
To my knowledge, there's nothing like that really going on, that a law is really crowdsourced. I know that that the European Union publishes its laws, of course, but there's not really too much active participation going on, as to my knowledge, but yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you. This brings up an element perhaps we need to consider. If privacy itself is a form of activism, which I think is an important part for our panel, so privacy issues, a means by which and around which younger people are organizing and mobilizing because they see these issues in specific ways. For instance, crowdsourcing legislation in order to make that more open, more transparent, so to counter the sort of behind the closed doors approach to important legislation. So that's one example, crowdsourcing. What about privacy as a source of activism yourselves? Because that might be counterintuitive. We sort of see activists kind of in slightly different ways. Anybody want to comment on that, Catty?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of examples about privacy advocates fighting on, especially now after the Snowden revelations, there have been many options. In February, we have the campaign that my organization, with many others around the world, and in the United States, organized, which was named The Day We Fight Back. In The Day We Fight Back, we have two actions. One at the United States level, which we're asking individuals to call the legislators, asking them to make some meaningful reforms on the surveillance, the NSA surveillance laws. But there we also have international action, which was asking individuals to sign on the 13 principles, the necessary and proportionate principles. And we got 350,000 signatures, and more than 400 NGOs supporting that effort. And well, it was just a petition, and it's not like a concrete action like calling legislators that, you know, in the United States they have to pick up the phone. So it was still a good way of doing advocacy, because when you go to policy venues, whether the United Nations or other places, you can present the principles and all the support that they have from around the world, which is it's important for policy advocates. So there are different ways, and that was a privacy action. Okay. There have been more recently, like Reset the Net. I don't know if everyone was familiar, but on June 5, we were also, and this was a US endeavor, mainly trying to take back privacy by encouraging people to use end-to-end encryption, free software tools, and that promote privacy, but also asking companies to try to use and implement encryption in their products.
Thanks, Catty. Anya, you had a comment?
Yes, it's Anya. Well, I would say I was following the campaign, and I wouldn't say it's just the US. I think it's global, and I think this is really helpful for everybody to install various tools to protect their privacy. And coming back to Europe, I wanted to mention the campaign We Promise. It was a campaign done by EDRI and other European organizations during the European Parliament elections, where basically MEPs or people who were trying to become an MP and to go to the Parliament, you could just see who you could vote for and who is promising to protect your privacy. And then you could claim, if this person get elected, then you can claim and track if he or she is really fulfilling their promises.
And how would you track that?
It's a digital tool, I think. Well, you can track it online, and there's a certain procedure. I wouldn't go into details. Thank you.
Okay. Right, that raises issues and interesting issues in my mind. I'm not sure about anybody else, but we have a remote participant who wants to make a comment. Fascinating.
We have a question from a remote participant. What is the difference between online and offline activism, and why do we see online activism as less valuable?
Why do we see? Yes.
I think the lines are blurry. I will not make that distinction. Sometimes we go to the protest, like we were organizing a big rally in the United States against the NSA, and we were going all to DC to protest on the streets, traditional activism. But sometimes we are using tools like the internet to organize ourselves, and I don't see it as something, how should you use the word?
Contradiction. You see them as complementary.
Complementary, and also it's a good way to educate the general public if we want to get the message. Because the hard part is, how do we explain these complex topics that the lawyers understand, that the policy wonks understand, and how do we make it easy to understand so my mother or my father could understand what we are talking about? And then when we get the message to that level, then is when the protests or the campaigns really start growing.
Okay, thanks. Paula?
I think the reason why we think of it as a hierarchy where online activism is less valuable is because clicktivism, and it's so easy, there's variety in online activism where some is really easy to do. And when stuff is easy to do, we tend to put less value in it. So I think that's the reason. And right now, as Anya said, it's a really blurry difference between it because we normally use online tools for everything. When we want to invite people to do offline activism, we use Facebook or other social media, meaning that it's actually a part of online activism as well.
Could I ask a little bit about these tools? Because some of these tools are commercial, proprietary software tools, which of course we know are also the object of certain discussions about how they retain and use our own data. So as activists, do we have a kind of duty to consider the sorts of tools and the sorts of software, whether they be free and open source, or are we simply driven into the one that most people use? Is it possible to make that choice? And if it is possible, how to make that choice?
It's a hard one because on one hand, we prefer open decentralized services to protect our privacy and also for freedom of choice, as you said. But for other time, we are realistic and we want to reach out to the population who are not familiar with our talking points. So how do we reach to them? They are, for instance, in developing countries, they are mostly on Facebook. And I don't like Facebook personally, but well, they are there, you know, and we need to reach out to them. And people use Twitter, so we have to do, but they also read the media. So we also should not forget that media is powerful and we should always thinking how we can get our campaign go to the traditional media. Or we should not forget traditional tools like writing op-eds in the newspaper, you know. It's all a combination of issues and it's always depend of the context, what you are going to be using.
Anya?
Which tool are you going to?
Anya, well, I think that maybe it should be the other way around. Maybe we shouldn't be afraid of Facebook as a proprietary or corporate tool. Maybe we should change the laws so that we can put anything on Facebook and not be afraid that something might be removed or whatever I put on Facebook is becoming the property of Facebook. So, because it will always be, there will always be some social networks, some tools used by the masses. And it will always be difficult, even though I think we should raise attention and educate young people and old people about open source tools and various technologies. But still, I think it should be more, I think we should have more power as users.
Thank you, Anya. I think, Ribera, did you have a point? We have one from the floor, and I also just want to check that our remote participant is happy with that response before. Ribera, you okay?
Yeah, maybe to add to this, also regarding the e-petition platforms, like the really big ones like change.org or Avaz, we also have to maybe consider that there is also a business model behind that and that we kind of critically reflect on that as well.
Thank you. And just before, is the remote participant okay with that, or do they have anything further to add? No? Okay, so yes, go ahead. Please just say your name for the purpose of the record.
Yeah, hello, my name is Martin. I'm here with the New Media Summer School, and I wanted to just refer to one of the statements that our participants came up with, which was that if you are refusing to share your data on these social media sites, you are also withdrawing yourself from the social sphere that is on that is the internet, that is all these private connections that you have. And I think that is even more true for activists, because you have to rely, if you want to reach out to people.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the floor? Or is the mic back?
I don't know. Yeah,
yes, it's back. Go.
So I think it's even more true for activists that they have to rely on these tools and that they have to use these tools if they really want to create the outreach. And I was earlier talking as well to Ribera, and she was also pointing out the ECI platform, the European Citizens Initiative, and especially there I'm quite confused about the data that you have to hand in, because unlike all these offline petitions that you would have to sign, the European Citizens Initiative platform asks for a lot of personal data to make sure that you have this one person, one vote principle ensured. And it seems like an incredible invasion of privacy by the European Union in order to justify participation. And I want to know what, how you feel about that.
That's a very concrete example we can all identify with. Excessive and endless requests for data.
I have one comment there, and this is Catitza. So I think that in the campaigning, if we are talking about the privacy policy, that's something that we care a lot in my organization, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. So we have a strict privacy policy that we don't share the data with others. But you need to look to other privacy policies of other campaigning if they will treat your data with respect. And that's like, it's a key issue, at least for us as a digital rights organization, to have a strong privacy policy, but still doing campaigns.
Okay, thanks. Ravi, I think you had a response to the...
Yeah, about the European Citizens Initiative, I completely agree with you, and I also think that the threshold of signatures is too high because it's quite difficult to get that many signatures, especially for normal citizens, because you really have to be backed by a big organization that is able to mobilize that many people to really gather all these signatures. And also, yeah, that kind of creates a new inequality in maybe, yeah, participation.
Okay, too high a threshold. We just have something from remote participation and then an audience member.
The comments are coming from Twitter. One comment is about that users shouldn't have to think about things like encryption software and should all these things be done automatically. And the question is Twitter activism a real activism?
Does your comment relate to that question, or can you wait a couple of minutes?
I can wait.
Okay, just stay cool. It's cool. Okay, is back to this this authenticity question. It is one that keeps coming back, Catty, particularly in our education institutions. Is Twitter activism real? Any responses from our esteemed panelists? Is it real? Paula?
It is indeed real. We've seen that we've seen lots of hashtags on Twitter that have actually resulted in change. Or at least maybe not always in like laws and these sort of issues, but people actually standing up and helping each other. Like where people support each other that are maybe associated with the Pride movement. We've seen people being, what's the word for it? Abused and these sort of things, and they find each other and interact with each other, and that's one of the pros with the internet. You can do this, you can live almost anywhere, how isolated or whatsoever, and be a part of a minority, and you can still find people in the same situation and help each other and show support.
Thank you, Paula. I wonder if our remote participant would like to answer their own question, what is real activism? We'll give them time to come back on that.
I think a concrete example of a success campaign doing online activism was the Sopa Pipa campaign. I mean, that mobilized masses, and they called their congressman, and they actually changed the votes of the bills. It was not approved. And one of the issues is that if you mobilize really a lot of the population and you're targeting your congressman, those are votes, you know? And so if you really mobilize masses and you're targeting who is in favor of digital rights or who is against your digital rights, well, those are people who will vote in the next election. So that's a powerful tool too.
I have a feeling, though, it's to do with thinking that only Twitter itself is enough. I think, Catty, you're talking also about on-the-street demonstrations, about phoning Congress representatives and social media.
We use the internet to call Congress. Okay. So it's a mix.
It's a mix, thanks very much. Right, two people waiting. I think we might need to shift gear. I think one more comment, any more comments from the panel on that particular thread?
About Twitter in general, I think if it wasn't real, then there wouldn't be a case of Turkey, for example. I think that's a very strong statement. If it wasn't working as a platform for activism or for spreading information, for sharing and connecting, then it wouldn't be banned.
Okay, I think point well taken. Thank you very much. Let's move to our next audience member. Please announce who you are.
Hello, my name is...
It won't be kept in a database, just for the record.
My name is Merete Jockert. I'm from the New Media Summer School. I wanted to ask something about online and offline activism again. Like, if you do offline activism, you go to the streets, you reach like people who had never ever heard about this topic, for example. But if you do like online activism, how can we ensure that we reach people that are not in our filter bubble already, like that we are not sensibilizing the sensibilized people again and again, but to reach like other people?
Okay, I'm just wondering, just remember that question. Could we have the second question, just to bunch them together because of time? And then we will try and respond to both, perhaps.
Let me respectfully disagree with you, Paula. Yeah? Okay. So you said that the Twitter and Facebook activism is always real activism. Yeah, I don't agree with you with that. And my question is that where is the line between slacktivism, clicktivism, and a real activism, whether it's digital or not?
Okay, much bigger question. What is actually effective and real activism in any format? Okay, remote participants, and then we'll see what the panel has to say. Yeah? Oh, got to give her the microphone.
We have a question from an individual participant from France. He asks everybody in the panel, do you believe in equality of a right to privacy, irrespective of the nationality of the person? Does your own countries make such discriminations in their surveillance laws?
Okay, let's remember that particular detailed question. Before we turn to that response, let's hear some responses to the issue about real, not real, clicktivism, slacktivism.
So probably I see the things very combined again.
Katitya?
The example of the day we fight back, it was a petition and you have to sign the 13 necessary and proportionate principles, which was a legal toolkit of how to apply human rights law in the context of communication surveillance. And we got 350,000 signatures and 400 NGOs. It could die there and you will see it, oh, it's just people signing on a petition, but it not end that, because once we finish the petition, the advocates who are below the petition will bring the petition in front of the governments, and will be, for instance, governments from different countries who say, we cannot ignore this toolkit, you know, because there are 400 NGOs who are asking for that, and we just not go to multi-stakeholder dialogues or places and be ignored. So you use that. It's not that they die in the petition. You will mobilize and use whatever you obtain later.
Okay, and Paula? And then Ravi?
I would argue that slacktivism and clicktivism actually is a part of the internet activism, because it's about raising awareness. And anything done to raise awareness or like bring more people to discuss an issue should be counted as activism. So even clicking a link could be activism, because that's like you're one of the 300 persons or 3,000, and you're one of all these persons that will help this organization do this. So that's a statement as well. And
so we're hearing very strongly from the panel that this is where's our audience member who disagrees? Sorry, the one who said she didn't agree with, oh, that's right. Sorry, what's your name again? Could you just tell us why you still think that this is an issue?
Yeah, I'm Anna, by the way. So, yeah, why I think digital activism, sometimes slacktivism. Yeah, I can be informed that, for example, in China, someone is, I don't know, killing animals, and I got once, there was only one petition that I signed in my life, and it was like about against killing animals and torturing animals. So yeah, okay, I know, in China they are torturing animals, so I mean, what's the result? And I signed that petition.
Any responses to this? Yeah, Anya?
Well, I think it doesn't really matter if you know the cause you're fighting for. If you want to protect human rights, be it online or offline, if you want to protect the rights of animals, or if I want to protect the rights of animals, I would support it anywhere in the world. And it's your personal choice if you don't want to sign that petition, even if it's online. So I don't really see the difference.
I probably see it different again, and it's a combination of both. I mean, depending on who you sign it. There may be many petitions, but usually you sign it because there are serious organizations behind that petition who might be doing litigation, who might be doing advocacy, who might do policy and need global support to push for the reforms in these forums. So it depends on who is below the petition and what the petition is doing. Of course, you can move on from the petition base, which is not the best way to engage it. Sometimes engage someone. Sometimes you need it for policy, but it's not enough. Now with the internet, you can engage them to do some actions. For instance, for us, when we mobilize internet users to call their congressmen, that's a very powerful tool and it's more efficient than just sign a petition. Because people, is like her, they want to do something and we have to give them something to do. And so we are all the time thinking on that, you know.
Okay, we have 10 more minutes. We have 3 interventions from the audience. I'm going to ask those 3 to briefly put their questions and issues to us, briefly, so that our panel can actually respond, hopefully, in a clustered way, just for time purposes. So our first, please identify yourself and off you go.
Heine Banking. By the term filter bubble, something came to my mind and I wonder if you know about it. In system sciences, there is also a group bubble and a clan bubble. So they call it in groupthink and cleansing, that we are not aware, if we don't check the meaning, what other people say. So it's difficult. Are you aware of some deliberation approaches to check the meanings? Because Mark Twain wrote, when you think you know but don't, you get into trouble. I mean, I can post some links, but I really want to make sure that you are aware that just voting is not enough. You have to be informed.
Okay, just voting is not enough. Okay, we do need to be informed. And the second, keep that in mind.
Yes,
Briefly,
Panos Kagveros, I'm a spokesman for the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. What about the notion of buying clicks, buying friends on Facebook? How do we know that you actually have actual signatures for some petition, whether you're a corporation or an individual movement? Isn't that a problem? That's my basic question.
Okay, these are important questions. And last but not least.
I just have a comment.
Sorry, could you identify yourself?
I'm Els from New Media Summer School. I'm an animal activist and we actually reach lots of people through collectivism. I think collectivism is important for any kind of activism. We've been reaching thousands of people in just a few months' time and we've been saving thousands of hens from the egg industry from being slaughtered just by collectivism and people trying to contact us over social media like Facebook. So I think it's a great way.
Okay, 3 very, one example of how it actually does make a difference, and 2 questions. So respond any way you wish, panel, because this is your last round, more or less.
I'm going to reply. So my organization, we do a lot of digital activism globally and in the United States. So many congressmen have tried to undermine our work by saying exactly what you are saying. So what we have done, like, saying, oh, there are free kids in the basement doing all the clicks on Twitter, you know. And what we do is now we use new tools. For instance, we develop widgets, which in the February campaign, the day we fight back, everyone will put the widget in their website. So then you saw a lot of websites with that widget. I mean, that cannot happen, you know. That's why it's a way of digital tools, but showing, hey, this is not free kids, because if there are so many websites, they have people get involved. Twitter, the feed of the Twitter, you know, you know when they're a bot and when it's a real person. So you sign a petition and then you tweet something. So it shows traffic. So there are a lot of ways that we are all time thinking to show the governments that it's not just free kids in the basement doing this, but actually mobilizing the masses.
So perhaps this is actually a false dilemma that we're dealing with. Any more responses? Rabia, Anya, Paula? No? The question from the audience was to do with, do you actually go back to your responses to your campaigns and consider what people are actually talking about in terms of substantive, or are you simply gathering signatures? That was the question, really. Do you check that people are actually mobilizing around the same issue? And is that important to know? Paula.
Yes, of course you have to check, because you want it to go viral, you want it everywhere. And as with the case of just buying, they have a problem because they won't retweet, they won't favorite, they won't spread it on. Passing it on is really what it's about. You can't have one person buying 10,000 tweets saying, hey, we managed to get this many in this petition, because then it won't happen, it won't grow a movement out of that. Whereas if you get people to retweet it and talk about it, you could have people protesting on the streets, as with ACTA and all these sort of things. So I think it makes a big difference.
So in a sense, the sort of media that we're using to mobilize, educate and organize are in fact now simply part of our landscape. So Ribera?
Yeah, but on another note, because I think the very first question of this question round was also really important about the digital divide, that we kind of mobilize the people that are already politically engaged offline, and it's like very often it's those people who are also active online, and I think that's really a problem. Like, how do we mobilize also diverse people with different educational backgrounds? So I think here also media literacy plays an important role, and I think that there should be also maybe a bigger emphasis on this.
And also, if I can remind us, Catty's very important point about what we call now the traditional media, printed media, the old-fashioned stuff like television and newspapers, that in fact, Catty is reminding us that in fact these are also places where you do reach other audiences and educate people and need to in other formats. But we have another, I think, comment from the remote participation. Isn't that great? They're all participating remotely. Doesn't that prove our point?
Thank you. We have another question from France. Do you believe it is consistent with human rights for national law to give different privacy rights to people solely according to nationality? Or in other words, do you believe in equality of a right to privacy irrespective of the nationality of a person?
I think it's a very important question to end on, and I think I'd like to ask our young panelists to, or start with Catty, our young at heart, and our even younger at heart panelists. I mean, I have to push this. I mean, after all, look at me.
I will say that that's the law. The law, international human rights law, provide equal protection for everyone, regardless of nationality or statelessness. And so this equal protection is enriched international human rights law.
Okay, is that clear? I think we should all be protected regardless of our nationality. And Anya?
Well, yeah, I'll just add that Universal Declaration of Human Rights is providing protection for privacy, and therefore we should not divide by nationality. I think we're all equal, and we are all equally eligible to have a right to privacy and to be protected.
Ribera?
Yeah, I wanted to say the same.
And Paula, you get the last word. Paula is
But
also
there's
officially,
nothing to add.
sorry to interrupt, Paula is just officially our youngest participant, so does that matter?
I don't think so. There's nothing to add.
Okay. I think we finished on time. In fact, ahead of schedule. I'd just like to thank our fabulous panelists for being so vibrant and visionary, and thank the audience and thank our remote participants.